Hello, and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am Chris Crawford, and I am joined today by my friend and colleague Ryan Boyer. Today is Saturday, April 15th, and today's episode is brought to you by Rival Fantasy. So we're going to take a look at the first 2 weeks of the season, and on today's shows, we're going to be looking at some players who have gotten off to inauspicious starts to the 2023 campaign, and whether you should remain patient or maybe whether it's time to move on. But before we do that, Ryan, we got to look at some headlines, and look, I'm biased. I got to talk about Jared Kelenic. Homered in 4 straight games, and not just homering, destroying baseballs, also doubled. He is currently hitting, Ryan, and this is like so warming to my heart. 366, 422, 780, 4 homers, 2 stolen bases. Like, I'm not asking if Jared Kelenic can have a 1.203 OPS, but I am wondering, Ryan, like just how excited you are from a fantasy perspective about this start from a guy who was one of the top prospects in baseball and now appears to have things clicking.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's April 15th, but I don't think it's too early for the Chris Crawford victory lap on Jared Kelenic.
Never.
Yeah, we've been waiting for it. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. Like when I saw that home run, especially the one at Wrigley, like I knew he had power. I did not know he had that kind of power. Like I know the wind was blowing out.
That's true
but,
too.
I mean, like I don't know if you heard the reaction from especially the Cubs broadcasters.
I did.
John Sciambi was just like dumbfounded. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I don't think I've seen a ball hit there before."
Oh my gosh, man!
Yeah, I actually saw. It was funny. This is kind of a getting on a tangent here, but I was watching MLB Central and Mark DeRosa, who played with the Cubs for a couple of years. He said the only other person he's seen hit a ball there, I assume this was during batting practice, Carlos Zambrano. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Like I knew really Carlos Zambrano was an amazing hitter for a pitcher. I didn't know he had that kind of power. But anyway, getting back to Kelenic, yeah, like, and that wasn't the only one either. I think I looked it up. I can't remember the number exactly, but I think he's averaging like 434 feet per home run or something like that. I mean, these are not cheapies that he's hitting. And the fourth one yesterday, the four home runs in 4 days, like that looked off the bat like a routine fly to me. And then it ended up going like 415 feet or something. So super encouraging. I mean, he's not playing against lefties. I don't think, or I don't know if he's made a start against lefties. I think he's actually one of his home runs came against a lefty, but I think he only has like 5 plate appearances against lefties so far. I'm not sure how the Mariners' schedule has broken down exactly against facing southpaws, but I mean, if he continues hitting like this, AJ Pollock is a pretty good platoon partner if that's what it's going to be.
Sure.
So they might stick with that, but I have a feeling if Jared Kelenic continues to hit like this, he's not going to be sitting against anyone. But yeah, I mean, the power is just gorgeous to watch right now. Yeah. He's got some speed. Only thing that holds me back maybe is the lefty thing. Like the counting stats could be held back a little bit in that regard, but yeah, obviously just incredibly encouraging what we've seen from him.
Yeah, and I will point out too that he did start against a lefty last night. So Austin Gomer, who you know well,
Austin Gomber, yeah. Oh yeah, that was the lefty homer.
That was the lefty homer. So he hit 6th, which was interesting to see against a lefty. By the way, Mariners, I love you to death. They're sending my grandma a bobblehead of Cal Raleigh. But my one complaint: why is Cal Raleigh not in the lineup for your bobblehead night? Come on, he can hit left-handed pitching real well. You've got to be in the lineup for that thing. But look, real quick to finish up on Kelenic. It's not just that he's hitting home runs. his average exit velocity is in the 95th percentile. His hard hit
Mhm.
percentage is in the 99th percentile. His expected slugging is literally the best in baseball right now. He's barreling the baseball at the 97th. All those numbers are great, Ryan. The biggest one for me is his chase rate is in the 79th percentile. We have seen Jared Kelenic swing at horrific pitches for 2+ years.
Yep.
And look, it is a small sample. It is tax day. I'm sorry to remind everybody of that, but it is tax day. And there's a lot of baseball left to be played, but you can't help but judge what you've seen so far. And what you've seen from Jared Kelenic so far has been absolutely sensational.
Good reminder that the progression is not linear.
No.
We like to remind people of that. So,
and worth pointing out too, on MLB.com's top 100 prospects, Jared Kelenic was younger than 20 of them. 20 of them coming into the season. That is just a great point too, because there's lots of time for Jared Kelenic to keep figuring stuff out. Another guy who looked awfully good to begin the year, Ryan, Jeffrey Springs. He's going to miss at least 2 months, according to Jeff Passan. Left on Thursday after 3 innings and felt the organization's hope is that this was just elbow discomfort and he felt nothing more than irritation, but the MRI changed expectations. Ryan, this is a pretty big bummer for a guy who looked awfully good to me.
Yeah. Huge bummer. It's funny. In hindsight, not as much, but I tweeted out before when they sent Taj Bradley down. I was like, don't be surprised if the Rays find an injury and bring him back in 5 days to start. And then an hour later or whatever it was, Jeffrey Springs actually got hurt. He's been just as good and better than what anyone could have hoped, following up on that kind of mini breakout, I guess, last year. I think he was ready to take on more of a workload this year. Still, it seems up in the air still what exactly is going to happen with the elbow. Like they are consulting multiple doctors and sounds like surgery might be an option. So we just don't quite know yet. At the very least, he's dealing with, they called it ulnar neuritis. Basically, he's just tingling and numbness in your hand. But it sounds like something else is going on with the elbow too. So hopefully you can keep him stashed on your IL. In like NFBC leagues that don't have IL spots, you can be forced into some difficult decisions. But yeah, just a bummer about Jeffrey Springs. But we do get to see more Taj Bradley. I assume. I don't think the Rays have confirmed that he's going to be back up to take that spot, but it would be easy for him to slide back in. And he looked really good. The final line in Bradley's first start wasn't great. He ended up getting charged with, I think, 3 runs in 5 innings, but that was towards the tail end of the start, and he had not been built up much pitch-wise yet in the minors, so I think maybe he probably tired out a little bit. He had like 8 strikeouts in those 5 innings, so encouraged to see what we can get out of Taj Bradley. Maybe we can look at a little bit of a silver lining there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's such a bummer with Springs because like a 24-4 strikeout to walk ratio in a limited time is 0.56 ERA. He was throwing, like you said, way better than anybody could have possibly expected. Did get to do it against some pretty awful lineups, to be fair, but he looked the part doing it. This guy's looked the part doing it for a while, and this went from being an uh-oh to maybe a major uh-oh for me. Brandon Woodruff is going to remain shut down while doctors determine how best to proceed with his shoulder injury. Now, Ryan, when I read reading about the Woodruff injury, it sounded like this was going to be something that was like a minimum stint on the injured list. And it sounds like this is going to be a lot more than an injured, based on what I'm reading right now, something a lot more than that keeps him out than 15 days.
Yeah, it usually isn't a good sign when a team has language like, we're consulting multiple doctors and deciding how best to proceed.
Yeah.
We don't know yet what it's going to entail. Woodruff, correct me if I'm wrong, as shoulder issues have been an issue for him at times in the past. I know last year he had it's actually similar, I think, to what Springs it was like Raynaud's syndrome or something like that.
That's right.
Not quite the same thing as the ulnar neuritis or whatever, but he ended up coming back from that and pitching great down the stretch. So, but yeah, the workload is something that Woodruff is not totally conquered at this point. And it's looking like he might be out a while. Hopefully the news will come out today or tomorrow or whenever, and it'll be better than expected, but not a great sign when they're saying, they're consulting multiple doctors, deciding the best route to take. So just fingers crossed for Woodruff.
And the bummer here too is not just, that he was out. It's that he was pitching really, really well. Like I'm just looking at his Savant page, and everything but hard hit percentages in the red, and 44th percentile there is not exactly getting, lit up like a Christmas tree. And he was getting plenty of whiffs, getting guys to chase. I will say that rotation spot, whoever they fill it with, is not too intriguing to me at this point. At some point, Robert Gasser would be somebody I would look at if this is a long-term thing, as somebody who has Ethan Small. Of somebody in our chat asked if you would add Ethan Small. Swing and miss stuff is great. His command is so awful that I can't trust him. I just can't. It might be somebody who I would consider in a real deep league adding to my bench and seeing if he does throw strikes. But at every level, Ethan Small has put up like a 10.5 strikeout rate and a 5-point walk rate. And those two things, you can deal with, you can obviously deal with the strikeouts. They're great, but he does so much self-inflicted damage that I just don't think that's and he is pitching in relief at this point. But if he does get a chance to start in the long term, there's a chance for success. I can't trust him right now in the short term. And I just figured out how to hit the hide button on StreamYard again. It's been a while since I've hit that button, Ryan. Other interesting headline here. So everybody, I think, was on the Vaughn Grissom hype train coming into the year. At least I was a little bit. Had some defensive issues in spring training. Doesn't make the team. Orlando Arcia, who is a very good defender, ends up being the starting shortstop for Atlanta. Arcia is now on the injured list. Vaughn Grissom is back. Ryan, if Vaughn Grissom is still available in fantasy leagues, is he somebody you're running to pick up?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we saw the upside with him last year. He struggled a bit down the stretch, but I mean, for a guy as young as he is, I think maybe he's 22, maybe he's still 21.
Still 22.
22. Skipping over AAA, and he didn't have that many games under his belt at AA, I don't think, when he came up to the majors. And to look as good as he did, super impressive stuff. I mean, his numbers in Gwinnett this year were phenomenal. OPS over 1,000. I think he had a home run, a stolen base, and more walks than strikeouts. So the bat is very encouraging. He can run a little bit. He's got a frying pan for a glove. He's passable, I think, probably defensively. I know he's been working with Ron Washington, but we'll see how long Arcia winds up being sidelined. He's got like a microfracture in his wrist. Yet another injury that we're talking about that we're not sure exactly how long he's going to be sidelined yet, but it sounds like multiple weeks at minimum. I know one of the Braves beat writers mentioned that Nick Castellanos had a similar injury and missed, I think, 4 weeks or so, but his was to his top hand, and this is to Arcia's bottom hand. I assume the bottom hand would be more of an issue, cause it maybe a longer-term stint, but we just don't know yet. It's possible Vaughn Grissom takes the job and runs with it, though. He certainly has that skill set. Someone in the chat here is saying 2 months on Arcia. I don't know if that's a guess or if they had released something new. But I could see a stint that long on the injured list. Sure. We'll see.
Yeah.
Grissom, but yeah, Grissom is certainly certainly because of that upside that he displayed last year, both from a power and a speed perspective, I think is worth scooping up in any leagues where he might be available.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to forget that 792 OPS for a guy who played less than 30 games at Double-A for more than a playoff contender, a playoff baseball team is pretty darn impressive. There are flaws with Vaughn Grisham, to be sure, but the biggest flaw is that he's not related to Marquise. I just don't understand how that's possible. Like, how is this? How is that last
bummer.
name? Yeah, it is a bummer for sure.
I mean, if he were related to Marquise Grissom, though, I assume he would be playing for the Blue Jays, though. That's what they just hoard former big league.
They really do. They really do. Guy who's off to a pretty nice start here, Ryan, and a couple of homers last night. Rowdy Tellez, now up to 5 homers on the season in his 12 games. That puts him on a right around a 75 homer pace. Obviously, that is very sustainable. No, but hitting just 214 with a 300 OPS, or excuse me, a 300 on base percentage, it would be very hard to have a 300 OPS with 5 homers at this point in the season. That is just some math for you. I think you've been a pretty big fan of Tellez for a little bit, Ryan. I could be wrong. And how encouraged are you by this start?
Yeah, I think he's got the 2 homer game last night. He's got 4 home runs over his last 4 games. He was a guy, not only did I believe that the power breakout last year was for real, he wound up with 35 home runs last year. I thought he could be a guy who benefited more than most from the shift restrictions.
Sure.
The average has not been great so far, but his expected batting average per Baseball Savant is like more than 50 points higher. So maybe there's some positive regression due in that regard. Mm-hmm. He's probably never going to be a average asset, but I could see him hitting 250 and hitting 30 plus bombs again. Definitely. So yeah, I mean, I think as you mentioned, he's on like a 75 homer pace or whatever it is. Probably not going to keep that up, they got a kind of a natural platoon there with Luke Voigt. So Tellez I think he's 0 for 6 so far against lefties so far this year. Mm-hmm. That's going to keep his counting stats down a little bit. If he played a little bit more, he could easily get to 100 RBI. I think he'll probably fall short of that because he's not going to play a ton against lefties. But
right,
I believe in the power, and I think the average could be at least passable for Rowdy Tellez.
Yeah. I mean, he's a extremely flawed baseball player, both real life and fantasy, but it's certainly possible with that guy's power. And, he is a big man who needs a big cereal. There's no doubt about it that he has the potential to have that 40 to 50 homer season. Based on what we've seen so far, it looks like that could be coming this year. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to be taking a look at some players who have gotten off to some slow starts, and we'll offer our level of concern about them. A new MLB season means it's time for a new kind of daily fantasy baseball. Rival Fantasy is the fantasy platform reinventing the way daily and weekly games are played, and they've brought new games to the ballpark this year that fantasy players won't find anywhere else. Rival Fantasy's games include Fantasy Bingo, head-to-head player challenges, and Fantasy Book, where users can select over-unders for 2 to 5 players. With games like this, daily fantasy baseball has never been better. Right now, RotoWire listeners can get a $50 protected first play. That means if you win your first play, you keep your winnings, but if you lose your first entry, Rival Fantasy will fully refund you up to $50. Go to play.rivalfantasy.com/signup and use code RotoWireMLB at signup and deposit a minimum of $25 to get your first entry on Rival protected up to $50. Now's the time to step up to the plate and become a Rival today. Welcome to the arena. And Ryan, we got to talk about Vivid Seats. Baseball is back, swing into the MLB season with Vivid Seats and score tickets to all of the hottest matchups and biggest games of the year. Every crack of the bat, every deep center fly, and every heart-pounding double play of your favorite team live and in person. Plus, with Vivid Seat Rewards, now you earn rewards with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets, then simply cash in your credit towards your 11th ticket purchase today. It's that easy. Pro reward tip. Buy tickets for your whole group, Split the bill and make progress towards your free 11th ticket even faster. From behind the plate to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2023 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats. Experience it live. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. Ryan, that's a good. I never thought about the group thing. Like if you've got a group of like 11 to 12 people or something like that, if you just use that, that's like taking that bill like in half, or like not in half. I'm very good at math this morning. Can't you tell? But it's like it's such a substantial difference by using something like that.
Yeah, let's get on that.
Yeah,
let's get a group together.
You know, the Cardinals play Seattle this weekend. It may be a little too late to work out travel plans, and I think we might have to work. I know one of us definitely has to work over the weekend, and that one person is Mr. Christopher Crawford. But it would be a lot of fun. We could finally settle the debate. What's worse, Seattle Dogs or St. Louis Pizza? I like my chances. Let's take a look at some players who are off to some poor starts. And let's start with some hitters, Ryan. I'm going to start with a little weird one. And I'll say this. We're not talking about, like, Alex Bregman's start is obviously concerning for somebody who drafted him in the top 40 picks. But we're not talking about guys like that per se. We are talking more about guys who are on the fringe, not necessarily even like guys on your bench. Maybe you're starting a few of these guys who have gotten off to poor starts, and whether you're looking to either cut bait or trade. And let's start with Salvador Perez, which is a weird one for me because, look, the catcher position is getting better. It's still not that deep. But I look at what Perez has done so far, and I look at what his flaws last year too, Ryan. But off to a 216, 245, 373 start with just the two homers. He's still on pace for like 25. 6 RBI, 9-1 strikeout to walk ratio, which is good for a pitcher and not so good for a hitter. How concerned are you by Salvador Perez's poor start?
Not really. He's not hitting the ball nearly as hard as we're used to. What we've seen him, especially a couple years ago, just post elite exit velos. That hasn't been the case so far this year. The launch angle I've noticed is way up. He's always been a fly ball hitter, and now it's been like extreme. I wonder if he's just trying to murder every pitch and it's not working out. But I'm going to fall back on the track record with him still. I think he's coming into the season and still is the best bet of any catcher to lead the position in home runs and RBI. Part of that is the track record that I mentioned, and also he just plays so much. So you're going to have the play discipline has always been terrible with Salvador Perez. You're going to have some peaks and valleys, but I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be fine to an extent. I will say this. If I could trade him and get, like, for instance, if somebody offered me a solid starting pitcher in Cal Raleigh for Salvador Perez, I'm jumping on it because I think Raleigh has a chance to put up similar power potential and a better average. And also, I like the lineup protection better too. And that does matter in fantasy. Like that Kansas City lineup, I love Bobby Witt Jr. I love Vinny Pasquantino. I love absolutely nothing else. It is really hard to watch right now. And it's, to be fair, they have faced actually some pretty good pitching to begin the year. Like Minnesota's starting staff has been unreal, and they obviously held them to, I believe, -6 runs is how many runs Kansas City scored in that first series. But yeah, like obviously you're not dropping him, and in a 2-catcher league, if you play in those, just stop it. Stop enabling 2-catcher leagues, folks. But if you are playing in something like that, obviously you're not dropping him. I would be looking for upgrades because there's a good chance if you drafted Salvador Perez, like top 60, top 75 pick, you were probably relying on him to be a pretty nice offensive thing. I'm not panicking by any stretch of the imagination, but I worry about how many games he's played over his career. I'm worried about that approach. He's going to go through stretches like this, Ryan, where he is just not that guy. So I'm not like panicking. I'm talking myself around this thing, Ryan. I am concerned. I am concerned about Salvador Perez, but I don't know. I really don't know. The catchers scare the crap out of me. But like as they age, Ryan, they just seem to have.
He's got a lot of wear on those tires. That's for sure.
He really does. And it's funny. Like I look at Salvador Perez and I think, oh man, in year 45, he still looks pretty good. But then you look at his age and he's still a pretty darn young guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'll be an interesting one to keep following. Teoscar Hernandez has not gotten off to a very good start, Ryan, but I think we're both going to be on the same page with this one. He's hitting 236, 288, 436. He does have the 3 homers, 1 stolen base, 1 caught stealing. The 1-16 strikeout to walk ratio, and as a guy who watches a lot of the Mariners, his approach at the plate has just been awful. And it's been an issue for him in the past too. Like this is a guy who has never walked more than 45 times in a season. But this to me is the type of guy that you're absolutely staying patient with, right?
Oh yeah, we're doing patience with Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, the batted ball data looks good. Expected batting average of 291 versus the 236 he's actually batting. He's generally been a pretty slow starter in his career. Career OPS in April of 778. Career OPS in May of 676. All the other 4 months, the lowest OPS he's put up is 814. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So he's generally gets off to, I think last year he actually got off to a really good start in April and then tanked in May. But over the course of his career, he's a guy who's been better during those warmer months. So, going from Rogers Center to what are we calling Seattle's ballpark now? T-Mobile.
We're calling it that, but we're not actually calling it.
Okay, yeah, that's a downgrade, but he has enough raw power, and especially the way the ball's been playing so far this year. I'm not too worried about the ballpark downgrade for him. I think Teoscar's going to be fine.
Yeah, look, this is what you get with Teoscar Hernandez because the approach is so poor. You're going to have streaks where he will almost single-handedly win you a week, and there are going to be stretches where you wish you had just left the lineup spot blank because he's going to rely on BABIP. He's going. I would have liked to have seen him start running a little more. He's probably got to get on base a little bit more in order to actually start running. But
that would help.
Like that would help. It's funny too. Like that home run that Kelenic hit to center field. The play before that, Oscar Hernandez absolutely destroyed a baseball into left field, and nobody talked about it because Jared Kelenic hit the longest home run in StatCast history in Wrigley Field. I just wanted to talk about Jared Kelenic once again. Jeremy Pena. Real bad start. 203, 277, 373. Does have the pair of homers. 17-4 strikeout to walk ratio. A guy who dealt with real patience issues after a real hot start in 2022. And then, of course, a real hot end was like the Astros' best player, wins World Series MVP there. But this has not been a particularly impressive start. And I'll be honest, Ryan, I am concerned about Jeremy Pena. How about you?
Yeah, this is the first one where I would lean more if you're asking for a definitive answer between patience or pass, I would lean more towards pass. The play discipline, as you mentioned, not great. He's began the season batting leadoff. He's been moved down to the 6th spot in the lineup. He actually hit 7th Friday. Exit velocity so far this season, 86.3, really bad. Strikeouts are up. I think the only red in his StatCast page right now is his sprint speed. I think he's still going to provide some stolen bases, and he's going to hit some home runs. But, he wound up with an average of like 252 or something like that, 254 last year. I would take the under on that for 2023. For roto leagues, I think he's still going to be fine to roster because he's going to provide a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. But, he's already been moved down to the lower in the lineup, as I mentioned, and the Astros are due to get Jose Altuve and Michael Brantley back at some point. So probably not going to be moving back up in that lineup. The counting stats are going to be going to suffer as a result. So I think Pena is certainly still rosterable in deeper leagues, but I'm not super optimistic that he's going to build on last year's numbers.
Yeah, I am concerned here, and I think the fact that he moved down in the lineup is probably the biggest one for me, because the counting stats are just going to be down. And look, the patience at the plate has been better, but keep in mind what we're talking about here with better. This was a guy who walked in the 4th percentile in 2022. He's up to the 29th percentile in 2023. And it's worth pointing out that that has not come with a real increase in chase rate, or if it has, it's been very small. Chase rate was in the 8th percentile in 2022. It's in the 11th percentile in 2023. This guy's just too aggressive a hitter and not talented enough, all due respect to him, to make – this is not the Javi Baez of 2017, 2018, where it doesn't matter what he swings at. He's going to kill the baseball. That's not him. He's always going to have real life value because his defense is good. I don't give a crap what Savant tells me defensively right now. That is one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball, and he's always going to be, because he's an extremely good athlete. But unless he's hitting near the top of that order and getting a chance to drive in, like when Jose Altuve comes back and stuff like that, that's not interesting to me. There are just too many. The shortstop position has not been great this year, Ryan, by any stretch of the imagination, but there are too many options right now for me to have him as my starting shortstop. Do I think you could justify him as like a starting middle infielder right now? Yeah, probably, just because, again, the dearth of position. But I would be looking to upgrade if he's my starting shortstop, and even if he's my starting middle infielder. Hey, let's talk about another catcher for the Kansas City Royals, because that's just what we're going to do today, Ryan. MJ Melendez, who I thought was pretty darn impressive actually in his rookie season. The numbers have been kind of terrible. 196, 302, 348, just the one homer and 53 plate appearances. But I think, as you're going to tell us, Ryan, this has been one of the most unlucky hitters in baseball.
Don't presume to know what I'm going to tell you. This is all going to be a surprise to you. I'm the only one who has access to this information, so this is going to blow your mind. Please. No, actually, I must give credit to our former colleague at our last place, Mr. Matthew Pouliot, who tweeted out something on about Melendez yesterday that caught my eye. And those numbers have changed a little bit with one more game added to those totals, but he is, as you mentioned, just been extremely unlucky. 98 miles per hour is his average exit velocity right now. 98, not his max exit velo, his average.
Yeah.
Only Matt Chapman's is higher among qualifiers. 68% hard hit rate leads all of Major League Baseball. Just insane numbers. 24% barrel rate. He's got an expected batting average of 258. Not great, but compared to his actual 196 average, pretty big difference there. Even more stark contrast here. Expected slugging percentage, 597 as compared to his actual slugging percentage of 348. So just a guy who's due for some major positive regression. Strikeouts are an issue for him. They have been this year as well. I'm not counting on that. You know, I mentioned that he had a expected batting average of 258. I would be thrilled if he gets to that number. I'm not expecting that to happen, but the power is due to just majorly rebound. And I also I've always had an affinity for catchers who don't catch very much.
Yes.
Like for fantasy purposes, that's I always go back to, remember Craig Wilson from the Pirates?
I sure do.
I remember that one season where he had catcher eligibility. I think he caught exactly 20 games the season before. And then I don't even remember what year it was. It had to be like 2003 or something like that. And then he hit like 290 with 25 bombs, and it was just amazing. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent
feedback.
here, but
No, that's okay. I love tangents because look, I also have to. I will say I just got distracted by something I just saw on Twitter that I will bring up in just one sec. But yeah, I will say this: Melendez really struggling with fastballs, and it was something that I was looking at the other day. Somebody was asking me how the heck he has these numbers. He's faced 67 four-seam fastballs, Ryan, 19 plate appearances. He has 0 hits. He has 0 slugging percentage. He is whiffing on four-seam fastballs on 52% of his swings.
That seems a tad high.
That's a pretty high. It's a 47.4% K rate against him. His expected batting average against sinkers is 562. His expected batting average against changeups is 455. His expected batting average against curveballs is 319. His expected batting average against sliders is, not very good, 145. It's 106 against four-seamers. So I do wonder if pitchers maybe are attacking him a certain way more often than not, and that's one of the reasons why we've seen that. But there's just been way too much hard contact. And, when he hits at the top of the lineup, we talk about the fact, that we don't love that Kansas City lineup. But getting a chance to be driven in by 3 of those guys that we mentioned isn't such a bad thing. So what distracted me on Twitter here, Ryan? The Angels have called up Zach Neto, their first-round pick last year. They sent David Fletcher down. I got to tell you, I'm interested in Neto because of one thing. I actually do kind of like the Los Angeles lineup a lot more than I did before. This is a very aggressive assignment. A guy who literally was their first-round pick last year, has not played in AAA, but really impressed and talked to a bunch of scouts. I think this is an interesting play. I'll make you off the cuff tell you if you're interested in him, and especially in like an AL only or a format that can afford a little bit wider pool.
Yeah, I mean, where was he playing this? Was he at AA?
He was a trash panda, baby. AA Rocket City. Panda.
Yeah, I know I remember you would know better about this than me, but like during the draft season last year, reading and hearing a lot about people talking about how he's was a really good get at that point in the draft for the Angels, and by the way, has a high fantasy ceiling. I think he's got some power and some speed. A good, super good athlete. So yeah, I mean, I assume he's gonna play every day.
It'd be really weird if he didn't, wouldn't it? Like if you're calling up somebody from AA. By the way, real quick on his profile. So he was at Campbell, which is not exactly a baseball powerhouse. And if he played for USC or the other USC, South Carolina, or somewhere like that, he's probably a top 5 pick. But because he did play in, a league that the Big South is not exactly a baseball utopia. And real quick, his stats in 2023, it's just 7 games, but he went 12 for 27, 444, 559, 815 with 3 homers and 3 stolen bases over 7 games. Yes, it is AA, and it is facing off against a lot of roster fodder. But that's pretty darn impressive, Ryan. And he's a guy who held his own in what we saw during the Cactus League. I remember writing up a couple of updates about doing well. I'm excited for this. I will also caution that, look, it is a rookie shortstop playing in the AL West, going to face, other than AA Midland, aka Oakland, he's going to face some tough competition in there. I think Zach Neto might already be the best Oakland Athletic if I really think about it, like too hard.
That's not a high bar to clear, no. Mr. Crawford.
No, but yeah, I will say this. If you're playing in a league and you're looking for some middle infield alternatives, that's an interesting one. If you're listening to this live, maybe go get him on your league right now. Let's talk about some pitchers. And Ryan, I think this one's going to hurt you because we're going to start with Chris Sale. Chris Sale has been really bad, Ryan. Chris Sale has been really, really, really bad. An 11.25 ERA over his 3 starts. Does have 19 strikeouts, but he also has 7 walks. The FIP suggests that it has not been just entirely bad luck with an FIP of 7.62. Ryan, I'm not asking if you're cutting Chris Sale right now, but if somebody's offering you a decent trade or he's facing against the top line, like you got to be at least a little bit concerned about Chris Sale right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would be silly not to have some level of concern. You know, 11.25 ERA, as you mentioned. He's already given up 5 home runs. The control has been terrible. But 19 strikeouts, velocity has been fine. Swinging strike rate has been fine. Let me read you off these numbers.
Please do.
BABIP of 406.
Ooh.
Yeah. Little unlucky there. 52.6% strand rate. So basically anybody who gets on base is scoring against him. 41.7% home run to fly ball rate. So more than 2 out of every fly balls he allows are leaving the park. I just think that this is a guy who has hardly pitched for 3 years and is still searching for his command. Maybe I'm going to end up looking dumb for that take. It's certainly possible. It would not be this might be shocking to you that it would not be the first time I've been wrong about something. But I still have some faith in Chris Sale. Like you can't put him in your lineup right now. Like I would be, he actually is maybe he's not a 2-start pitcher anymore because he was supposed to start Monday and now they're going to bring up Brian Bayo instead. So I don't know. I'm not sure if he's a 2-start pitcher next week or not, but keep him on your bench and hope that the command gets better. I think it will. There's just he's still the rare occurrences when he's been healthy the last couple of years. He's still pitched well.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff is not peak Chris Sale anymore. But as I mentioned, he's shown without premium velocity that he can still make it work. It's just such an odd arm angle he comes from, and he can be extremely hard to hit even if he's not hitting 97 regularly. I really think it's a guy that's searching for his command still because he's just been he's just rusty. He's hardly pitched. I don't know what the workload's going to look like. I don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy, but I remain pretty confident that when he's on the mound over the long haul, he's still going to be pretty effective.
Yeah, and I think he's probably going to be fine too. But I do have some concerns here, and I will say this. If he was the guy that you drafted as if you're somebody who kind of ignored pitching and he was drafted as your SP2 or SP3, you got to be looking to upgrade immediately. Immediately. His stats for his fastball, we just went over how MJ Melendez
he's my SP2 virtually everywhere, by the way.
Oh, buddy, I'm so sorry. Yeah, you'll be fine probably. But let me tell you why you probably may not be fine. Probably may not be fine. That's an interesting way to put it. 4-seam fastballs, Ryan. Expected batting average of 0.499. Expected slugging percentage of 1.091. Expected weighted on base average of 0.669. That is not a nice stat there, Ryan. Ryan, 669. Hard hit percentage of 75th percentile. Hitters have also hit his sinker pretty well. Expected slugging of 533. I almost wonder if you have to consider, if you're the Red Sox, moving this guy to a multi-inning relief type role for a little bit. But the problem there is then you're not building up his stamina. So you're kind of danged if you do, danged if you don't. While you're waiting, I'm probably leaving him out of my fantasy lineup. I need to see Chris Sale have a 5-inning, 8-strikeout outing where he gives up 2 runs or fewer before I go, okay, this is going to be just fine. But look, it's been a little bit of bad luck because he is missing plenty of bats, but it's not just that. He's giving up plenty of hard contact to go along with it. Let's talk about another hard thrower who throws literally harder than everybody, Hunter Green. So Hunter Green has been pretty bad in his 3 starts as well. 14 innings. Now, he does have 23 strikeouts, but he also has a 5.14 ERA, a 1.64 whip, and he plays for the Cincinnati Reds, which is not necessarily, Ryan, the greatest win chance opportunity per se. How concerned are you by Hunter Green, or are you still optimistic going forward? Or if you're, I don't even, not even still may not be right. You may not have been optimistic at all.
Yeah, I still like Hunter Green a lot. Like,
good.
His last start, I'm going to be interested to see the pitch breakdown going forward with him. He upped his slider usage in his last start and had 10 strikeouts and 21 whiffs. Because the fastball, for as hard as he throws, and he throws very hard, has been pretty hittable. Mm-hmm. I think his best recipe is to at least the slider usage like be on par with the 4-seamer usage if he wants to cash in on all that swing and miss upside. And I think there's certainly injury and workload concerns with him. Just a guy that's that young and throws that hard, he's automatically going to have some injury concerns built in. So I don't know what a workload perspective is going to look for from him, but from just a per innings basis, like maybe Spencer Strider's got a higher upside from a strikeouts perspective, but I think Green is in that conversation.
Sure.
It's 5.14 ERA, but a 2.51 FIP right now. As you mentioned, he pitches for the Reds. The wins are going to be a concern. The win potential, I believe he's 0-0 so far. Only got like 5 wins last year, but I think the strikeout potential is still elite, especially in leagues where, like I'm in the Yahoo Friends and Family League with that Scott Pianowski puts on, and there's an innings cap in that league. Like he's going to have a lot of value in a league like that, to where you need a lot of strikeout bang for your buck, and I think he's still going to provide that.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm a huge Hunter Green fan, especially in the long term, because like he's such a sharp kid, and like again, elite athleticism. Worth pointing out, a lot of people forget this guy would have been probably a top 15 pick as a shortstop coming out of high school. Not too many people you can say that about. My concern with him is because he is basically a 2-pitch pitcher, that there are going to be those starts that just frustrate the heck out of you. Because if one of those offerings isn't working, or heaven forbid, both of them aren't working, he can't rely. I think he's thrown a total of 5 changeups this year, Ryan, which is not a total that suggests. And it's weird because it was a pitch that I think she showed real promise with at the minors, but clearly not something that he has a ton of comfort with right now. Be prepared to take some bitter with the better, maybe against real patient lineups, somebody that you consider sitting, but you definitely have to have him, because this literally could be the guy who leads the league in strikeouts. It would not shock me one bit if he ended up being there, and you're certainly not dropping the strikeout leader. Blake Snell, my Shorewood buddy, who has never met me and has never heard of me, but we'll call him my buddy anyway. 6.92 ERA over his 3 starts. He's striking out more guys than he is innings pitched, but some of that is because he's just not getting many innings pitched. He's only thrown 13. He has a reprehensible whip of 2.15. Ryan, we've been burnt by Blake Snell in the past, and we have also seen that, like, when he's at his best, he is awfully good. How concerned are you by Blake Snell over this very poor start?
I mean, it's really just about what your expectations are, I think. Like, if you're expecting a guy to give an ERA in between 3.5 and 4 with a whole bunch of strikeouts, then he can do that. But if you're expecting a guy that taking the numbers from last year and just extrapolating that over 32 starts, then that's not the guy that you're going to get.
Right.
I don't know if you saw in his last start that he basically blamed PitchCom for his struggles. Apparently he was trying to press slider on PitchCom and pressed a different button or something, and then decided, because the pitch clock was running down, that he was just going to throw this pitch anyway. And I don't know, it just seems
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, specious argument to be sure. And
But
it really doesn't matter what button you're hitting, Ryan, when you're walking 15.2% of your hitters, by the way.
Right. And that's, by the way, that last start was his longest of the season so far at 5 innings. So,
yeah. I mean, look, I'm sorry to interrupt you just because we want to move on to a couple more guys. But look, I think Blake Snell will probably end up being a fine starting option. He's probably the one person that we've talked about so far that I would actually be okay, like flat out dropping, because there are some good starting pitching options, and there is a risk to me that like Blake Snell can do more harm than good. Like when he's at his worst, he can be an absolute guy. And, I'd probably be looking to trade him at this point, like in a fantasy league. You're certainly not selling at his highest value. But when Blake Snell is like this, it's so bad. It is. I've been burnt before, Ryan. I have been burnt before by the Blake Snell train. I was so excited about him after that. I believe it was the Cy Young year. I can never remember anything at this point, but if he didn't win it, he was certainly in the conversation. I'm pretty sure he did.
He did.
Yeah, it's and again, his whiff percentage is great. His fastball velocity is fine. He's getting plenty of extension on his pitches. But he's so inefficient, and for a Padres team that needs to win this year, I don't think that they're going to have a ton of patience with him. He's certainly going to stay in the rotation, but you're going to get these 3-4 inning starts, and that is going to become borderline useless in fantasy baseball. And I hope I'm wrong. But I would absolutely, if he's on my roster right now, be looking to make a trade and try to get some help other places, maybe get a couple of depth pieces. Ryan, Lance Lynn, a former St. Louis Cardinal, a guy who I was actually pretty excited about based on what I saw from the World Baseball Classic. He was the one starting pitcher for Team USA who actually looked like they were pretty good. Has not necessarily translated over into the regular season. Over 3 starts, he has a 7.31 ERA over 16 innings. Is missing bats. I think that's been the kind of the one carryover for all of these pitchers is that they are putting up the strikeouts. He has 21 in 16 innings. He's also allowed 19 hits and 13 runs. He's allowed 6 homers over those 3 starts. How concerned are you by Lance Lynn?
Not really. 6 home runs over the 16 innings. That's just not going to be
sustainable.
He's never, yeah. And he had 1 8 earned run outing. But last time out, 10 strikeouts, 0 walks. In 2 of his 3 starts, he's had at least 16 whiffs. So, it's still in there. We've seen this from. I feel like Lance Lynn is. I don't want to compare him to Blake Snell because the peaks and valleys are not like that. But Lynn can be prone to these occasional blow-up starts from time to time. They're just usually not as extreme as like Blake Snell. Right. And he's usually going to give you innings regardless, unlike Snell. But Lynn is a guy, I think, that you just got to stick him in your lineup. And by the end of the year, I think the numbers are going to be there. He's had, because he relies on his fastball so much, if he doesn't have the, just great command with it in a particular start, he can get hit hard. But he's going to give strikeouts. He's a great bet for workload. I think the White Sox are going to be pretty good. Pretty decent bet for wins. I think Lance Lynn's going to be fine.
Yeah, my main thing here is that Lance Lynn hasn't had a walk rate above 9 since 2018, and it is there. He just doesn't have the best command right now. There's too much of a track record of Lance Lynn being just fine throwing strikes. Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, I don't love necessarily the parks that he's going to be pitching in, especially at home, but there's too much of a track record here. And he did look good this spring, and I can't completely ignore that. Just off to a little bit of a poor start, not moving on here. Ryan, why don't you close this out? I talked about a former Cardinal. Why don't you talk about a current Cardinal in you just talk about him.
Mr. Miles Michaelis.
Yes.
Yeah, 10.05 ERA. over his first 3 starts, he's given up 29 hits in 14 and a third innings. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
And I will say, he is the type of guy who could be hurt by the shift restrictions, because he doesn't miss a ton of bats. He's actually, striking out, I think, a little over a batter per inning so far this year. But he pitches to contact a lot, and the shift restrictions, I think, could hurt a guy like that more than most. But, you look at the matchups he's had so far versus Toronto, versus Atlanta, at Colorado.
It's tough.
That's a pretty tough way to get out of the gate. He's been a guy who's just he's made his money on throwing strikes and being good at suppressing hard contact, but and he's still throwing strikes, but he's not getting that poor contact right now. I think it'll come to him. Again, I think this is a little bit of a what are your expectations? Michaelis is not going to be a guy to help you, unlike these other guys in this category that we've talked about, is not going to be a strikeout asset. But I think that I'm going to bet on the track record. I'm going to bet on the Cardinals' good offense and good defense behind him. He's going to give you a pretty good workload. He's one of the few pitchers who got to 200 innings last year, because he pitches deep into games and because he throws strikes and has a good defense behind him, good offense behind him. I think he's going to be a good bet for wins. The ceiling is a certain level that's not super high.
Right.
But I think for what you drafted Miles Michaelis for, I think there's still a good chance he's going to provide that for you.
So I don't know if you remember this, Ryan, but when we did our WHIP preview, I mentioned Miles Michaelis as a guy that I was.
I remember.
Yeah.
I believe you trashed his mustache too.
I did trash his mustache. Well, I more praised Dylan Cease's mustache than necessarily trashed his, to be fair. Yeah, so there's this thing we like to call confirmation bias, and we can certainly have it over 3 starts. I'll just say that my concerns have not been dissuaded over Miles Michaelis. This is a guy who right now is in the bottom 2 percentile in expected batting average and the bottom 7th percentile in expected ERA. Like, he's throwing plenty of strikes, only the 3 walks based on ball percentages in the 83rd percentile. Still gets pretty good spin on the fastball. The stuff just isn't very good. It's not. And he's going to have to roll. Yeah. And you bring up a great point too, with the Cardinals defense being good, but you bring up a great point too, with the fact that the shift is limited now. Like, this is not somebody who's going to get those ground balls in that second base hole. Those are hits now. And I do think that I probably wouldn't have drafted Michaelis in the first place, if I'm just being completely honest with you. I was impressed with what I saw for a lot of 2022, but there were some red flags to me. And, it's interesting too that with that contract extension, he's going to get plenty of chances to stick in that rotation for a couple of reasons. 1, because he's making a lot of money. And 2, I don't know if there's a hell of a lot of options, except for Ryan. I will say Matthew Liberatore has looked great and hitting big time fastball velocity, which is awesome to see. He might be somebody I'd be looking to pick up. Yeah, I would definitely be, but like in a deeper league, I'd probably maybe consider if a deep bench picking him up now, because I'd rather have him now than wait. And then when he gets to call up, you have to waste a whole bunch of fab. But long story short, Miles Michaelis, I am concerned. I am definitely concerned, and I hope I'm wrong, Ryan, because I'd love your St. Louis Cardinals to go to the World Series and make everybody happy, but I'm not so sure if it will be because of him. That's going to do it for us. I'm sorry to end on a negative note, Ryan. Thanks again to our sponsor, Rival Fantasy. You can follow me on Twitter at Crawford_MILB, and you can follow Ryan at Ryan P. Boyer. Please make sure and hit like and subscribe. And remember, we have a new episode coming out every single day during the 2023 season. Drew Silva and I will be back tomorrow, and we'll see you guys soon.